My name is Vinay Patel. I'm a playwright, and the play that I wrote for Payne's Plough was called Sticks and Stones, which was a sort of morality tale about offence and language in the modern workplace and how difficult it is for us to try and live together when we're all operating with different vocabularies. So I began working with Payne's Plough through a couple of workshop days where we knocked about ideas and wrote up a couple of scenes and then worked through them with some actors, and from there I ended up developing a full play over a period of months, and it was part of the Roundabout season, so you're one play among two others and you share the same cast and the same director, and in this case I was working with Steph O'Driscoll, who was terrific, and we, in a very quick period of time, we put this play together. We really pushed at the ideas in it. We got to be really light on our feet and really playful, knowing that it was going into the roundabout space, which you don't have a lot of adornment for, but there's a lot of energy and the audience are right on top of you, and just holding that in your mind was really exciting. It was a way of working that I hadn't done before, where you're just very aware of the audience's presence, both in terms of their engagement with the work, but also the way they can see each other and they can interact with each other's responses. And so for me, I found that a really exciting opportunity to kind of push towards a very theatrical kind of work, a work that presented itself out to the audience more fully and was really like pushing at them as much as possible, which was completely different to everything I've done before, and that was really exciting and a real challenge and a lot of work, but I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I think a lesson I learned from my experience of working with Payne's Plough on Sticks and Stones was that I'm a different writer than I thought I was, in the best possible way. I think it was a great way to be broken out of my comfort zone, having to work that quickly and that collaboratively. But also, I just found how much audience really matters in theatre, at least for me. Like I've always had some interest in audience, but something about that roundabout space really charges that. And so now when I think about anything I'm writing, I do always have the audience in mind and thinking about what this moment can do to them and how I can shift them and how I can make that a playful experience for both them and the people performing it. So I came to theatre relatively late. My first play I put on when I was 28 years old. Which is nothing in the grand scheme of things, but I think theatre was something that kind of existed on the periphery of my world. It seemed to be a lot of strange noises coming from rooms that I was never in. But I remember a friend of a friend was looking for someone to write short plays for a night of short plays above a pub in Kilburn, and something about the immediacy of that, the playfulness of it, the scrappiness of doing something with other people where you're all broke but really care, something about that aspect of community and passion really landed in me, and I went from being someone who thought I'd write lots of film and telly. For some reason growing up that seemed to be the more accessible thing, to suddenly going, actually theatre isn't it isn't something very grand, and isn't something very distant. It is almost the most immediate of forms. It is just a couple of people, it could be a couple of your friends just in a room trying to say to the world, hey, I think this, do you think this too? And so it went from being something that felt very distant to being the most possible storytelling form that existed to me. I think what theatre offers that other storytelling mediums don't is a sense of a shared experience and emotion. I think a theatre space holds feeling better than anything else, and that's partly because of the way an actor charges a space, but also the way that words and actions linger. They have a sort of residual memory in the space, even when it's gone, even when you're moving on to different scenes, and audiences are half watching what they're seeing, but they're also half remembering what's just sort of come before them in that exact place. And I love sitting in an audience and just feeling that charge of both the scene in itself, but also the cumulative effect of a wider story just kind of build and build and build and sit and wash over an entire group of people who might have completely different backgrounds and different reasons for coming to that theatre, but when you can just sort of feel that intake of breath happening all at once, or a laugh happening at the same time, there's something so galvanizing about that, especially in a very fractured and polarized world. When I think about my heritage and theatre in particular, when I started off, I think, in fact, I know a thing I had in my head was, I want to tell stories that reflect my background, but I also want to tell normal stories as well. That is literally how I framed it to myself, because the way I conceived of it was that my identity, people who look like me, could only be a sort of adjunct story to like a normal story. And I think part of my journey within theatre is being able to go, actually, the stories of people like me, people who look like me, people who share a background to me, are at the core of what this country is today. And it took a long time to come to that confidence, and the way I came to that confidence was by meeting similar people who shared that view from my background, but also similar backgrounds, not exactly the same, and just having those discussions that felt impossible to have, because you're told that the narrative of a country is set, and it's one that, if it does include you, it's almost as a sort of exotic texture as opposed to reality. Like, I remember my first play was a monologue called True Brits, which I took up to Edinburgh, and the poster, I was really insistent on there being this face of a brown man on this poster, and I didn't realise how important that would be for me, especially after I realised the only other poster that had a brown man's face on it, I think that year, was a browned up Italian man doing a version of the story of the Buddha. And it was something in being able to put that story out into the world and feeling people respond to it that made me feel like not only was it a thing that I wanted to see in the world, but it was a thing that I wish a younger version of myself had seen. And if I had had that, I probably would have felt more confident, I would have felt more comfortable, I would have had some sort of narrative that was pushing back against what the world was telling me about my own place in it.